Let's talk about how far we've come with this coronavirus and how much more we still have to figure out. Since the very start of the outbreak and throughout the pandemic, there's been a lot of debate, a lot of science, and for some of us, a lot of confusion.
The mixed messages leaving many frustrated.
I'm sorry, what? What do you, how can you, we gotta get this right, everybody.
There's plenty we're still learning, from how we avoid getting sick to how we deal with it when we do, and what the future looks like.
All of us need to understand that we're going to be living with this for some time.
So here's our most recent episode on COVID-19, updated with expert guidance to help us understand the pandemic and stay safe. Science is always evolving. It's just how science works. Someone does a study, publishes it, then others either confirm the results or point out the mistakes. But that all takes time. When the pandemic started, time wasn't on anyone's side.
Thousands of new cases every day.
Panic is rising as it spreads.
Nearly all travel stopped
A
because
lockdown which extends beyond the streets and into the home of every citizen.
For many of us, there was a lot of uncertainty back then. Governments had to rely on the information available. And the main body that's been putting that information out is the UN's World Health Organization. So we spoke to their lead scientist dealing with the coronavirus, known as SARS-CoV-2, to take us through what we knew then and what we know now.
Our understanding of this virus is evolving, it's changing, it's growing. We knew it was a novel coronavirus. And what our worry was, based on our experience with SARS and with MERS, were super spreading events.
We'll get to super spreading events later. But first, let's go over how this virus behaves. From the moment a person is infected, it can take up to 14 days for symptoms to appear. But usually, it's between 5 and 6 days. Some people can infect others just before they get symptoms. This is known as pre-symptomatic transmission. Other people never develop symptoms, but can still spread the virus. This is called asymptomatic transmission, but it doesn't appear to be as common. It's why we have to act like everyone's sick, because a lot of the time we just don't know who is. Now, the WHO says that on average, a person spreads the virus to 2 or 3 other people. It's what's called the reproduction number. It can be less. That means some people don't pass the virus to others at all, but it can also be a lot higher under certain conditions. That's when you have a super spreading event.
This virus operates in clusters. If you have people in close contact with one another, spending long periods of time together, you have more exposure, the virus will spread.
What seems to be happening is that a small number of infected people, about 10 to 20%, are responsible for around 80% of transmission events. For example, a singer in the US state of Washington infected 53 people at a choir practice. There was super spreading at a mega church in Seoul, at a football game in Italy, and it's still happening.
We're seeing outbreaks in restaurants, in nightclubs, which happen indoors. Many people want to get back to their normal lives. They want to have their friends over for dinner. But right now, those types of activities are safer outdoors than they are indoors. And part of that is about how these particles move around.
Scientists have always known that respiratory viruses spread through small particles. It's what we explained back in April. You can catch it from someone coughing, sneezing, or even speaking a little too close to you. But what if those droplets linger? Well, those particles can linger on surfaces and in the air. If particles are larger, they tend to travel a certain distance, let's say about a meter, and then fall to the ground. Scientists call these droplets. But if they're smaller, they can stay suspended in the air for longer and potentially travel much further. Scientists call these aerosols. So if she has COVID-19 and she's talking to me from across the room, there is poor ventilation in here, and neither of us is wearing a mask. The aerosols might still reach me, and that could infect me if enough of the virus reaches my eyes, nose, or mouth. It all depends on the environment. Scientists talk about the 3 C's: close interactions, crowded areas, and closed-off spaces without proper ventilation.
Think, for example, on many occasions, how far from a person smoking you can smell cigarette smoke. So this is the same mechanism for the virus. It travels with the air current.
But no matter the environment, the advice is the same. Things like washing your hands, keeping a distance of at least a meter, and wearing a mask. But there are still people who refuse to wear them.
Wear a mask.
Bye. I'm not wearing a mask.
You're coming close.
Back off!
Now, children can spread this virus, but for some reason, they don't seem to get as sick. And if children do get it, they're way less likely to die. By mid-July in the US, the Centers for Disease Control said the virus had killed more than 150,000 people, but only 17 of them were under the age of 5. But a few young people who got COVID-19 have also come down with a mystery illness. They're calling it PMIS.
I've never felt anything like it. The pain concentrated on the center of my chest. I didn't know what was happening to me.
Why some children develop this reaction to COVID-19 and other children just laugh it off is still a complete unknown.
So lots of research is still happening, particularly with vaccines. The numbers keep changing, but there are about 170 vaccines in development. Close to 30 are being tested on people. Russia says it's already rolling out its vaccine, called Sputnik 5. But Germany's warning against rushing through approvals and says a vaccine won't be ready to give to everyone before next year. We just have to sit tight.
Well, I think we have to be prepared that the first vaccines that come through may not be perfect. So they might reduce severe disease, but they might not fully stop infection or transmission.
Now it seems frightening. What will we do if we don't have a vaccine? But it is a possibility. Let's hope we do.
In the meantime, we have treatments that doctors say are helping, like steroids, which can reduce the chances of someone dying from COVID-19 by 20%. But the WHO recommends them only for patients who are very sick. They say they can actually be harmful if used for mild cases. There's other stuff scientists are still working out, like why COVID-19 can be so tough on some people.
So even people with mild disease that don't necessarily require hospitalization, it's still quite a disease to go through. And we are learning that individuals are having long-term effects from their infection.
I had the stomach problems. I had the loss of taste and smell. I'm not gonna lie, it was not fun.
It's 5.5 months later and I still feel pretty unwell.
A lot of us are having this weird experience called the COVID strangle. As you're waking up, you feel like someone's choking you. Doctors don't know, we don't have answers.
So there's a lot more to figure out. But all anyone really wants to know is, when can our lives go back to normal? The WHO says that's already possible, but it's a new normal. We have to take the right precautions, but they say we don't need any more countrywide lockdowns.
Many countries had to introduce lockdowns because they needed time. But now we have to lift up, we have to get out of that lockdown situation. We can target our interventions at a small geographic level where they're actually needed. They can be time-bound so that the entire country doesn't need to go into these so-called lockdown measures again.
So we know what we need to do to stay safe, and we know a lot more about how this virus spreads. Now, we've just got to learn to live with it. Science evolves, and the guidance on COVID-19 gets updated all the time. So the best way to stay informed is to access those organizations that research this stuff day in and day out, like the WHO and others who issue health advice. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.